The morning sun cast long shadows across the forward operating base in eastern Syria, where Staff Sergeant Elena Vasquez adjusted her body armor for what felt like the 100th time. The kevlar vest hung loose on her small frame, designed for male torsos and modified hastily to accommodate her presence. Around her, the members of Charlie Company went through their pre-mission rituals with practiced efficiency, checking weapons, reviewing maps, and sharing gallows humor that only soldiers understand. Elena moved through these same motions, but the atmosphere around her carried a different weight, thick with unspoken doubts and barely concealed resentment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The assignment had come down from higher command 3 weeks ago, delivered with the kind of bureaucratic language that masked its controversial nature. Integration of female personnel into frontline combat units represented the military's evolution. They said, a necessary adaptation to modern warfare's demands. Elena had volunteered for the program, knowing full well the challenges ahead, understanding that she would be entering a world where her very presence challenged decades of tradition and masculine identity. What she hadn't anticipated was the depth of hostility that would greet her arrival, or how every breath she took would be scrutinized as evidence of her unfitness for the role. Captain James Morrison had made his position clear from the moment Elena stepped off the transport helicopter. A career infantry officer with 2 combat tours under his belt, Morrison represented everything traditional about military leadership. His jawline could have been carved from granite, his uniform pressed to perfection despite the desert conditions, and his eyes held the kind of skepticism that came from years of seeing idealistic policies crash against battlefield realities. When Elena reported for duty, Morrison's handshake had been perfunctory, his welcome speech clinical and devoid of warmth. He assigned her to 3rd Platoon under Lieutenant Derek Sullivan, a decision that Elena quickly realized was designed to test her mettle under the most challenging conditions possible. Sullivan embodied a different kind of opposition, one wrapped in the language of concern and protection. 26 years old, with a face that belonged in a recruiting poster, he possessed the kind of natural charisma that made soldiers want to follow him into danger. His objections to Elena's presence came couched in seemingly reasonable arguments about unit cohesion, physical limitations, and the complexity of combat operations. He spoke of brotherhood forged in blood, of trust built through shared hardship, and of the psychological burden of protecting female soldiers in environments where protection might be impossible. His words carried the weight of genuine conviction, making them far more dangerous than outright hostility. The enlisted men of 3rd Platoon reflected the full spectrum of military culture's response to change. Corporal Michael Santos, a machine gunner from Detroit, had initially tried to maintain professional distance, unsure how to interact with a female soldier who might see combat alongside him. His uncertainty manifested in awkward politeness and careful word choices, as if Elena might shatter under the weight of typical military banter. Private First Class Tommy Richardson, barely 20 years old and fresh from basic training, oscillated between inappropriate fascination and genuine confusion about how female integration would affect unit dynamics. His youth made him susceptible to the influence of older soldiers, particularly those who viewed Elena's presence as a threat to established order. Sergeant First Class Robert Chun represented the worst of the resistance, though his opposition came dressed in the language of experience and practicality. A veteran of 3 combat deployments, Chun had earned his stripes through competence and aggression, qualities that made him invaluable in firefights, but poisonous in interpersonal relationships. His comments about Elena's presence came wrapped in military jargon and battlefield wisdom, making them difficult to challenge directly. He spoke of weight distribution in assault packs, of upper body strength requirements for casualty evacuation, and of the split-second decisions that determined who lived and died in combat. His arguments carried the authority of someone who had seen friends die and who genuinely believed that Elena's presence increased that risk. Elena had prepared for this resistance through months of intensive training, pushing her body beyond its natural limits and studying tactics with the dedication of someone who knew that mistakes would be amplified and failures would be used as evidence against all women in combat. She could run 5 miles in under 40 minutes, complete an obstacle course faster than half the men in her unit, and shoot expert with both rifle and sidearm. Her tactical knowledge had been honed through countless hours of study, and her leadership potential had been recognized by instructors who saw past gender to evaluate raw capability. Yet all of this preparation felt inadequate when faced with the daily reality of serving alongside men who viewed her as a liability rather than an asset. The forward operating base itself reflected the harsh realities of modern warfare. Constructed from prefabricated materials and surrounded by concrete barriers, it squatted in the desert like a metallic growth, functional but temporary. The living quarters were cramped, the facilities basic, and the constant presence of danger palpable in the way soldiers moved with weapons always within reach. Elena's assigned bunk sat in a corner of the female quarters, a small section hastily partitioned off from the main barracks. The isolation was both practical and symbolic, reinforcing her status as an outsider in a world that had never been designed to accommodate her presence. Daily life at the base followed rhythms established over decades of military operations. Morning formation began before dawn, with soldiers assembling in the compound central area to receive briefings about the day's missions and intelligence updates. Elena stood in formation with the rest of 3rd Platoon, her presence creating a subtle but noticeable disruption to the unit's cohesion. Conversations that would normally flow naturally became stilted when she approached. Jokes were left unfinished, and the easy camaraderie that bound the men together seemed to evaporate in her vicinity. The training exercises that followed formation provided Elena with opportunities to demonstrate her capabilities, but they also exposed her to the full weight of her platoon skepticism. During marksmanship training, her exceptional shooting drew grudging acknowledgement, but also whispered comments about the differences between range shooting and combat effectiveness. Her performance in tactical exercises earned respect from some soldiers but reinforced others' beliefs about the physical limitations that would become apparent under real combat stress. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Every success was minimized, every mistake magnified, and every interaction filtered through the lens of gender rather than individual merit. Lieutenant Sullivan's leadership style compounded these challenges by creating an environment where Elena's presence was treated as a problem to be managed rather than an asset to be utilized. His assignments consistently placed her in support roles, ostensibly for her own protection, but effectively preventing her from demonstrating her combat capabilities. When the platoon conducted patrol exercises, Elena found herself assigned to radio duty or medical support, positions that were undeniably important, but that reinforced perceptions of her as unsuitable for direct combat. Sullivan's explanations were always couched in tactical reasoning, making them difficult to challenge without appearing insubordinate. The psychological toll of this constant scrutiny began to manifest in subtle ways that Elena fought to conceal. Sleep became elusive as she replayed daily interactions, analyzing every word and gesture for signs of acceptance or rejection. Meals were consumed quickly and in relative isolation as the natural gathering places for soldiers. The mess hall, the recreation area, the maintenance bay felt unwelcoming to someone whose presence disrupted established social patterns. She found herself second-guessing decisions that would have been automatic in a more supportive environment. The constant need to prove herself creating a burden that her male counterparts never had to bear. Intelligence reports from the local area painted a picture of increasing enemy activity, with insurgent forces becoming bolder in their attacks on coalition forces and civilian targets. The region had become a crucial battleground in the broader conflict, with enemy fighters using the terrain's natural advantages to conduct hit-and-run attacks against military patrols and supply convoys. Elena studied these reports with the same intensity she brought to all aspects of her military service, understanding that her theoretical knowledge would soon be tested against the harsh realities of combat. The enemy forces operating in the region represented a complex mix of local insurgents and foreign fighters, united by their opposition to the coalition presence, but divided by tribal loyalties and tactical disagreements. Their weapons were a mixture of Soviet-era equipment and modern armaments acquired through various channels, making them unpredictable opponents who could adapt their tactics to exploit perceived weaknesses. Intelligence suggested that they had been watching the base's patrol patterns, looking for opportunities to inflict casualties and demonstrate their ability to strike at will. Elena's preparation for her first combat patrol involved equipment checks that bordered on obsessive, understanding that mechanical failures or oversight could be fatal in hostile territory. Her rifle was cleaned and recleaned until it gleamed, its action smooth and reliable. Her ammunition was counted and recounted, distributed in magazines that were marked and positioned for quick access. Her body armor was adjusted and readjusted until it fit as perfectly as the modified equipment allowed, providing maximum protection without restricting movement. Each piece of gear was inspected, tested, and positioned according to procedures she had memorized and practiced until they became second nature. The briefing for the patrol mission took place in the base's operations center, a cramped space filled with communication equipment, maps, and intelligence displays. Captain Morrison delivered the briefing with the kind of clinical precision that characterized his leadership style, outlining the mission objectives, known threats, and emergency procedures with methodical thoroughness. The patrol would investigate reports of enemy activity in a village 12 kilometers from the base, gather intelligence on local conditions, and demonstrate coalition presence to discourage further insurgent operations. Elena listened to the briefing with the focused attention of someone who knew that lives depended on understanding every detail. The route would take them through terrain that favored defenders, with multiple positions where enemy forces could establish ambushes. The village itself was a collection of mud brick buildings that could conceal weapons and fighters, making it necessary to approach with caution while maintaining the confidence that discouraged hostile action. Weather conditions were favorable, with clear skies and moderate temperatures that would allow for effective air support if needed. Lieutenant Sullivan's assignment of duties for the patrol placed Elena in a position that seemed designed to minimize her exposure to combat while ensuring that her presence didn't disrupt the unit's established procedures. She would serve as the platoon's communications specialist, responsible for maintaining contact with the base and coordinating with supporting units. The role was undeniably important, but it also kept her in the center of the patrol formation, surrounded by male soldiers who viewed her protection as their responsibility rather than recognizing her as a capable combatant. The weapons check that preceded the patrol gave Elena an opportunity to demonstrate her proficiency with the equipment she would carry into combat. Her rifle was a modified version of the standard issue weapon, adjusted for her smaller frame, but maintaining the same capabilities as those carried by her male counterparts. Her sidearm was positioned for quick access, and her ammunition load was distributed to provide sustained firepower if needed. She carried additional communication equipment, medical supplies, and navigation tools that would be essential for mission success. Corporal Santos approached Elena as she completed her equipment check, his expression carrying the kind of awkward concern that had characterized many of their interactions. His attempt to offer advice about combat operations was well-intentioned, but reflected the assumption that her training had somehow been inadequate compared to that received by male soldiers. Elena accepted his comments with practiced patience, understanding that his concern came from a genuine desire to see her succeed rather than from malicious intent. The patrol's departure from the base followed procedures that had been refined through years of combat operations. Soldiers moved through security checkpoints with practiced efficiency, their weapons ready and their senses alert to potential threats. Elena took her assigned position in the formation, her radio equipment functioning properly and her weapon prepared for immediate use. The morning sun climbed higher as they left the base's protective perimeter, entering territory where enemy forces might be watching and waiting for opportunities to strike. The initial movement through relatively secure terrain allowed Elena to observe her platoon's dynamics under operational conditions. The easy banter that characterized base life disappeared, replaced by the focused professionalism that combat operations demanded. Hand signals replaced verbal communication, and every soldier maintained constant awareness of their surroundings. Elena found herself settling into the rhythm of patrol movement, her training taking over as theoretical knowledge transformed into practical application. The terrain they traversed told the story of a region shaped by conflict and struggle. Ancient irrigation channels cut through desert sand, remnants of agricultural systems that had once supported thriving communities. Abandoned buildings dotted the landscape, their mud brick construction crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. The few signs of current habitation were subtle: fresh tire tracks in the sand, clothing hanging from lines, the distant sound of generator engines, indicating that civilian life continued despite the dangers posed by ongoing military operations. Elena's radio crackled with routine communication from base operations, confirming their position and providing updates on regional security conditions. Her responses were crisp and professional, demonstrating the communication skills that had been part of her specialized training. The equipment functioned flawlessly, maintaining clear contact with supporting units and providing the coordination capabilities that modern military operations required. As they approached the target village, Lieutenant Sullivan called for a halt to conduct final preparations and review the plan for their investigation. The settlement lay in a natural depression that provided its inhabitants with some protection from desert winds, but also created tactical challenges for approaching forces. Buildings were constructed close together, creating narrow alleys and potential hiding places for hostile forces. The population was estimated at fewer than 200. People, mostly families engaged in subsistence agriculture and small-scale trade. Elena studied the village through her binoculars, noting details that would be important for navigation and threat assessment. The main road entered the settlement from the north, passing between buildings that could provide cover for defenders. Several larger structures, possibly commercial buildings or community centers, dominated the central area. The southern edge of the village bordered an irrigation canal that could serve as either an escape route or a defensive position for enemy forces. The patrol's approach would be deliberate and methodical, designed to demonstrate strength while avoiding unnecessary provocation. Elena's role would be to maintain communication with supporting units and coordinate any requests for additional assets. Her position in the formation would keep her in the center of the patrol, surrounded by soldiers whose primary concern was her protection rather than her contribution to the mission's success. Private Richardson moved closer to Elena as they prepared to advance, his young face showing the nervous energy that characterized soldiers before their first significant combat operation. His attempt at reassurance was touching but misguided, reflecting assumptions about her experience and capabilities that were based on gender rather than training. Elena accepted his comments with the same patience she had shown others, understanding that his intentions were good even if his assumptions were incorrect. The final approach to the village required crossing open ground that offered little concealment from potential observers. Elena moved with the controlled precision that had been drilled into her through countless hours of training, her weapon ready and her senses alert to signs of danger. The desert sun beat down on them mercilessly, creating heat shimmer that distorted vision and made threat assessment more difficult. Sand crunched under their boots, a sound that seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence that preceded potential combat. Sergeant Chun's position at the front of the patrol gave him responsibility for initial contact with any civilian population they encountered. His experience in similar operations was evident in the way he moved, constantly scanning for threats, while maintaining the kind of confident posture that discouraged hostile action. His radio communications with Lieutenant Sullivan were brief and professional, confirming their approach and readiness to execute the planned investigation. The village's apparent emptiness struck Elena as ominous, suggesting that the civilian population had either fled or taken shelter in anticipation of military activity. Windows were shuttered, doors were closed, and the normal sounds of daily life were absent. This level of abandonment could indicate either advance warning of the patrol's approach or preparation for hostile action by enemy forces who had infiltrated the settlement. Elena's training had prepared her for the psychological challenges of entering potentially hostile territory, but the reality of the situation created a tension that was difficult to ignore. Every shadow could conceal a threat, every building could hide enemy fighters, and every moment of apparent calm could be the prelude to violent contact. Her finger rested near her weapon's trigger guard, ready to respond instantly to any sign of danger. The patrol's movement into the village proper required careful coordination to avoid presenting opportunities for ambush while maintaining the ability to respond effectively to any threats that might emerge. Elena's communication equipment allowed her to coordinate with supporting units and request additional assets if needed. Her position in the formation gave her a clear view of the surrounding area while keeping her protected by the soldiers who had been assigned to ensure her safety. Lieutenant Sullivan's hand signals directed the patrol's movement through the village's narrow streets, his tactical experience evident in the way he positioned his soldiers to cover potential threat areas. While maintaining momentum, Elena followed these signals with the same precision as her male counterparts, her training allowing her to anticipate the lieutenant's intentions and respond appropriately. The radio equipment she carried functioned perfectly, maintaining clear communication with base operations despite the challenging terrain. The investigation of the village's buildings required systematic searching that balanced thoroughness with speed, understanding that prolonged exposure in a potentially hostile environment increased the risks faced by the patrol. Elena's role in these searches was limited by Lieutenant Sullivan's determination to keep her away from the most dangerous aspects of the operation, but she observed the procedures with the focused attention of someone who understood that her future effectiveness would depend on learning from every experience. The first building they entered showed signs of recent habitation but was currently empty, its occupants having apparently departed in haste. Personal belongings were scattered throughout the rooms, and fresh food indicated that the evacuation had been recent. Elena noted these details in her mental log, understanding that such observations could provide valuable intelligence about enemy movements and local population attitudes toward coalition forces. The systematic search of the village continued through the morning, with each building revealing similar signs of hasty abandonment. Elena's communication with base operations provided regular updates on their progress and findings, her reports clear and concise despite the tension of operating in potentially hostile territory. The pattern of abandonment suggested that the civilian population had received advance warning of the patrol's approach, raising questions about information security and the possibility of enemy surveillance. Corporal Santos positioned himself near Elena during the searches, his protective instincts evident in the way he constantly scanned for threats, while keeping himself between her and potential danger. His concern was touching, but also frustrating, as it reinforced the assumption that she needed protection, rather than recognition as a capable soldier. Elena accepted his proximity with practiced patience, understanding that his intentions were good even if his assumptions were based on outdated stereotypes. The midday heat became increasingly oppressive as the patrol continued its investigation, with temperatures climbing toward levels that challenged human endurance. Elena's body armor trapped heat against her skin, and her equipment seemed to grow heavier with each passing hour. Yet her training had prepared her for these conditions, and she maintained the same level of alertness and professionalism as her male counterparts, despite the physical challenges. The village's central square provided a natural gathering point for the patrol to consolidate their findings and assess the situation. Elena established a communication post in the shade of a large building, her radio equipment allowing her to coordinate with supporting units and provide updates to base operations. The square's elevated position gave her a clear view of the surrounding area, making it an ideal location for maintaining situational awareness while conducting communication duties. Lieutenant Sullivan's assessment of the situation reflected the complexity of modern military operations, where the absence of obvious threats could be as significant as their presence. The village's abandonment suggested either advance warning of the patrol's approach or preparation for hostile action by enemy forces who had infiltrated the settlement. Elena's communication with base operations provided regular updates on these assessments, her reports helping to build a picture of regional security conditions. The patrol's preparation for departure from the village involved the same systematic procedures that had characterized their arrival, with soldiers maintaining constant vigilance while preparing for movement through potentially hostile territory. Elena's equipment checks were thorough and methodical, understanding that mechanical failures during withdrawal could be fatal. Her radio equipment continued to function perfectly, maintaining clear communication with supporting units despite the challenging environmental conditions. As they prepared to leave the village, Elena reflected on the morning's events and what they revealed about her integration into the combat unit. Her technical performance had been flawless, her communication skills had proven valuable, and her physical endurance had matched that of her male counterparts. Yet she remained relegated to support roles that limited her ability to demonstrate her full capabilities as a combat soldier. The patrol's success had been achieved despite rather than because of her presence, a dynamic that she knew would need to change if she was to be truly accepted as an equal member of the unit. The return journey to the base would take them through terrain that offered multiple opportunities for enemy forces to conduct ambush attacks. Elena's communication equipment would be crucial for coordinating with supporting units and requesting assistance if needed. Her position in the formation would keep her protected, but also limit her ability to contribute to the patrol's defensive capabilities if they encountered hostile forces. The morning's patrol had provided Elena with valuable experience in combat operations, but it had also reinforced the challenges she faced in gaining acceptance as a full member of the combat unit. Her technical skills were undeniable, her physical capabilities were proven, and her tactical knowledge was sound. Yet the assumptions and prejudices that surrounded her presence continued to limit her opportunities to demonstrate her full potential. As a combat soldier, the real test would come when theoretical knowledge and training exercises gave way to actual combat, where her actions would speak louder than any words in proving her worth as a warrior. The intelligence briefing that morning carried an urgency that Elena had not experienced during her 3 weeks at the forward operating base. Captain Morrison stood before a room packed with soldiers, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern as he outlined the situation that had developed overnight. Enemy forces had conducted a coordinated attack on a supply convoy 20 kilometers south of their position, killing 4 soldiers and capturing a significant cache of weapons and ammunition. The attack sophistication suggested that insurgent capabilities in the region had evolved beyond previous assessments, and command was demanding immediate action to prevent further escalation. Elena sat in the back row of the briefing room, her presence creating the usual subtle disruption to the unit's dynamics. Conversations that might have flowed naturally between soldiers became stilted when she was within earshot, and the easy camaraderie that characterized military briefings seemed to evaporate whenever attention turned in her direction. She had grown accustomed to this isolation, but the morning's intelligence made such social dynamics feel particularly insignificant compared to the genuine threats they would soon be facing in the field. Lieutenant Sullivan's tactical assessment of the enemy's capabilities painted a picture of adversaries who had learned to exploit the coalition's predictable patrol patterns and communication procedures. The insurgents were no longer content with hit-and-run attacks on isolated targets. They had begun coordinating complex operations that demonstrated sophisticated planning and execution. Their weapons had improved from the crude improvised devices of earlier conflicts to military-grade equipment that could challenge coalition forces in direct confrontation. Most concerning was their apparent ability to gather intelligence on military movements, suggesting either infiltration of local populations or technical capabilities that had previously been underestimated. The mission that emerged from this intelligence would be 3rd Platoon's most dangerous assignment since Elena's arrival. They would conduct a reconnaissance in force through the area where the convoy attack had occurred, gathering evidence about enemy tactics while demonstrating coalition resolve to continue operations despite the increased threat level. The mission's complexity would require every soldier to perform at peak effectiveness, with no margin for error or hesitation. Elena understood that this operation would provide her first real opportunity to prove her worth under combat conditions, but she also recognized that failure would be interpreted as validation of every prejudice about female soldiers in combat. Roles. Sergeant Chun's reaction to Elena's inclusion in the mission manifested as a series of increasingly pointed questions about her readiness for high-intensity operations. Private Richardson's increasing nervousness manifested in behavior that threatened operational security and unit effectiveness. His constant questions about potential threats and his obvious anxiety about Elena's presence in a combat situation created distractions that could prove fatal if they encountered enemy forces. Elena's attempts to provide reassurance were professional and calming, but they also highlighted the psychological burdens created by soldiers who were more concerned about her welfare than focused on their own responsibilities. The tactical pause that Lieutenant Sullivan called to assess their situation provided an opportunity for Elena to demonstrate her value as more than just a communications specialist. Her observations about terrain features and potential enemy positions showed tactical acumen that impressed even skeptical soldiers like Corporal Santos. Her suggestions about route modifications were practical and well-reasoned, though Sullivan's reluctance to accept tactical advice from a female soldier limited the implementation of her recommendations. The discovery of fresh tire tracks in the sand provided concrete evidence that enemy forces had been operating in the area recently. Elena's documentation of these findings was meticulous, including measurements and photographs that would help intelligence analysts determine vehicle types and probable routes of movement. Her attention to such details demonstrated the kind of professional competence that gradually began to erode some soldiers' assumptions about her capabilities, though deeply ingrained prejudices remained largely intact. The patrol's movement into an area of broken terrain created new tactical challenges that required constant vigilance and careful coordination. Elena's communication equipment became even more critical as natural features interfered with radio transmissions and made contact with supporting units more difficult. Her technical expertise in adjusting frequencies and antenna Positions proved valuable in maintaining connectivity that other soldiers might not have been able to preserve under such challenging conditions. Sergeant Chun's growing unease about their tactical situation expressed itself through increasingly aggressive questioning of Elena's readiness for potential combat. His concerns about her ability to maintain effectiveness under stress were voiced in terms of unit safety and mission success, making them difficult to challenge without appearing to prioritize personal feelings over operational effectiveness. Elena's responses were measured and professional, but the constant need to justify her presence created psychological pressure that her male counterparts never had to endure. The afternoon's reconnaissance revealed a pattern of enemy activity that suggested more sophisticated planning and coordination than previous intelligence had indicated. Elena's role in documenting these findings involved detailed photography and note-taking that would support future tactical planning. Her observations about enemy movement patterns and defensive positions demonstrated tactical insight that gradually began to earn respect from soldiers who had initially dismissed her capabilities based on gender stereotypes. The thermal signatures detected by their surveillance equipment indicated that enemy forces were operating in the area, though their exact locations and intentions remained unclear. Elena's communication with base operations provided regular updates on these developments while requesting guidance on how to proceed, given the evolving tactical situation. Her reports were clear and concise, providing the kind of reliable information that commanders needed to make informed decisions about mission continuation or modification. The decision to extend their reconnaissance into areas of known enemy activity reflected the mission's importance while acknowledging the increased risks that such operations entailed. Elena's equipment checks were thorough and methodical, ensuring that her communication gear would function reliably during potential combat operations. Her weapon was prepared for immediate use, and her ammunition was distributed to provide sustained firepower during extended firefights that might develop without warning. Corporal Santos's protective positioning near Elena became more pronounced as they moved into increasingly dangerous territory. His constant vigilance for threats that might specifically target her reflected both genuine concern and fundamental misunderstanding of her role as a combat soldier rather than someone requiring protection. Elena appreciated his intentions while recognizing that such attitudes limited her ability to contribute effectively to the patrol's defensive capabilities. The late afternoon sun created challenging visibility conditions that favored defenders over advancing forces. Elena's communication equipment required constant adjustment to maintain contact with supporting units as atmospheric conditions interfered with radio transmissions. Her technical expertise in managing these challenges proved valuable in preserving connectivity that would be essential if they encountered enemy forces and needed immediate support or evacuation. The patrol's approach to a village that intelligence suggested might harbor enemy sympathizers required enhanced caution and tactical awareness. Elena's role in maintaining communication with base operations became critical as they entered an environment where hostile contact was increasingly likely. Her equipment functioned reliably despite challenging conditions, providing the connectivity that would be essential for coordinating any response to enemy action. Lieutenant Sullivan's tactical decisions reflected the tension between gathering necessary intelligence and avoiding unnecessary risks to his soldiers. Elena's observations about enemy capabilities and likely positions were incorporated into his planning, though her suggestions about tactical modifications were received with skepticism that reflected persistent doubts about female soldiers. Combat judgment. Her professional competence gradually began to influence even skeptical soldiers, though fundamental attitudes about gender roles in combat remained largely unchanged. The discovery of recently abandoned enemy positions provided disturbing evidence of hostile forces' proximity and capabilities. Elena's documentation of these findings was systematic and thorough, providing the kind of detailed intelligence that would support future tactical planning. Her photographs and measurements demonstrated attention to detail that impressed soldiers who had initially questioned her, professional competence based on gender stereotypes rather than individual capabilities. The communication intercepts that Elena's equipment detected indicated enemy forces were coordinating activities in the immediate area. Her technical expertise in signal analysis provided valuable intelligence about enemy communications patterns and operational procedures. These capabilities demonstrated aspects of her training that went beyond basic combat skills, though some soldiers continued to view such technical competence as evidence that she belonged in support rather than combat roles. The patrol's withdrawal from the reconnaissance area required the same tactical discipline that had characterized their advance, with constant vigilance for enemy forces who might attempt to interfere with their movement. Elena's communication equipment maintained reliable contact with supporting units, despite challenging terrain and atmospheric conditions. Her position in the formation provided good fields of fire while preserving her ability to coordinate with base operations if combat developed. The psychological pressure of operating in territory where enemy contact was increasingly likely affected different soldiers in various ways. Elena found herself dealing not only with the normal stress of potential combat, but also with the additional burden of knowing that any mistake would be interpreted as evidence against female soldiers in combat roles. Her training had prepared her for such pressure, but the reality of facing it while surrounded by skeptical male soldiers created unique challenges that required constant mental discipline. The evening's return to base would provide an opportunity to analyze the intelligence they had gathered and plan future operations based on their findings. Elena's role in documenting the enemy capabilities and positions had proven valuable, though her contributions were often overlooked or minimized by soldiers who remained skeptical about female effectiveness in combat situations. The real test of her capabilities would come when theoretical knowledge and reconnaissance experience were challenged by actual enemy contact under combat conditions. The patrol's successful completion of their reconnaissance mission demonstrated tactical competence and professional effectiveness, but it also highlighted the ongoing tensions surrounding Elena's integration into the combat unit. Her technical performance had been flawless, her observations had proven valuable, and her physical endurance had matched that of her male counterparts. Yet she remained viewed with skepticism by soldiers who questioned whether such capabilities would translate into effectiveness under the stress and chaos of actual combat operations. As they approached the base perimeter, Elena reflected on the day's events and their implications for her future role in combat operations. Her professional competence was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss, but deeply ingrained prejudices about female soldiers remained largely intact among her male colleagues. The approaching test of actual combat would provide the ultimate measure of her capabilities, where performance under fire would either validate or refute every assumption about women in combat roles. The emergency alert that shattered the pre-dawn silence at the forward operating base carried the kind of urgency that transformed sleeping soldiers into fully equipped warriors within minutes. Elena's eyes snapped open at the first piercing note of the alarm, her body moving through the practiced motions of combat preparation, while her mind processed the implications of being roused at 0347 hours. Around her, the female quarters erupted into controlled chaos as the few women stationed at the base prepared for whatever crisis had developed during the night. The darkness outside offered no clues about the nature of the emergency, but the sustained wailing of the alert system indicated that this was no drill or routine activation. Captain Morrison's voice crackled through the base communication system with the clipped precision that characterized military emergency protocols. A coalition patrol had missed 2 scheduled check-ins while operating in the northwestern sector, an area that recent intelligence had identified as increasingly hostile to coalition operations. The patrol consisted of 8 soldiers from Alpha Company who had been conducting routine reconnaissance when communication was lost approximately 4 hours earlier. Initial attempts to re-establish contact had failed, and aerial surveillance had detected signs of combat activity in their assigned operational area. 3rd Platoon was being deployed immediately to locate the missing patrol and provide assistance or evacuation as the situation required. Elena's equipment preparation took on heightened significance, as she understood that this mission would likely involve actual combat rather than the reconnaissance and patrol duties that had characterized her previous operations. Her rifle received the meticulous attention that could mean the difference between life and death in sustained firefights. Each component checked and rechecked to ensure flawless operation under stress. Her ammunition load was increased to provide sustained firepower during extended engagements, and her communication equipment was tested thoroughly to guarantee reliable contact with supporting units throughout the operation. Lieutenant Sullivan's briefing in the operations center revealed the gravity of the situation they were about to enter. The missing patrol had been operating in terrain that favored defenders, with numerous positions where enemy forces could establish effective ambushes. Recent intelligence suggested that insurgent capabilities in the region had evolved beyond previous assessments, and the sophistication of recent attacks indicated that coalition forces might be facing a more organized and better equipped adversary than initially estimated. The mission's success would depend on speed, tactical flexibility, and the ability of every soldier to perform at peak effectiveness under extreme stress. The pre-mission equipment check revealed the full weight of Elena's isolation within the unit's social structure. Soldiers who had begun to acknowledge her professional competence during recent patrols now reverted to protective attitudes that treated her as a liability requiring special consideration. Sergeant Chun's comments about her assignment to the mission were couched in terms of tactical necessity, but his underlying skepticism about her combat effectiveness remained clearly evident. His suggestions about keeping her in protected positions during any firefights reflected assumptions about female capabilities that no amount of training or demonstrated competence seemed able to overcome. Corporal Santos approached Elena with the kind of awkward concern that had characterized their interactions since her arrival at the base. His attempt to provide tactical advice about combat operations was well-intentioned, but revealed the persistent assumption that her training had somehow been inadequate compared to that received by male soldiers. Elena accepted his comments with practiced patience, understanding that his protective instincts came from genuine concern rather than malicious intent, even as such attitudes limited her ability to contribute fully to the unit's combat effectiveness. The patrol's departure from the base occurred under conditions that emphasized the seriousness of their mission. Additional ammunition and medical supplies were distributed to account for the possibility of casualties and extended combat operations. Elena's communication equipment was loaded with enhanced encryption protocols that would prevent enemy forces from intercepting their tactical communications. The darkness that shrouded their movement provided concealment from potential observers, but also created navigation challenges that required constant vigilance and precise execution of predetermined routes. The initial movement through familiar territory took on ominous significance when viewed through the lens of a missing patrol and probable enemy contact. Areas that had seemed secure during previous operations now appeared as potential killing zones where hostile forces might have established ambush positions. Elena found herself constantly scanning the horizon for threats, while maintaining the communication schedule that kept base operations informed of their progress. The radio chatter that connected them to supporting units provided some reassurance, but it also reminded her that they were moving toward a situation where such support might be desperately needed. The thermal imaging equipment that Elena operated as part of her communication duties began detecting heat signatures that suggested human activity in their operational area. Her technical expertise in interpreting these readings proved valuable, as she identified patterns that indicated both friendly and potentially hostile forces. His concerns were couched in the language of tactical planning and unit effectiveness, making them difficult to challenge directly without appearing defensive or unprofessional. He questioned whether her communication equipment would function reliably under combat stress, whether her physical stamina would hold up during extended operations, and whether her presence would create psychological burdens for male soldiers who might prioritize her protection over mission accomplishment. Each question carried the implicit assumption that Elena represented a liability rather than an asset to the unit's combat effectiveness. The weapons and equipment check that preceded the mission took on heightened significance, given the increased threat level they would be facing. Elena's rifle received the same meticulous attention she had given it before previous patrols, but now each component was examined with the understanding that mechanical failures could be fatal in sustained combat. Her ammunition load was increased to provide sustained firepower during potential firefights, and her communication equipment was tested and retested to ensure reliable contact with supporting units. Every piece of gear was positioned for maximum accessibility during the chaos and confusion that characterized combat operations. Private Richardson's nervousness about the upcoming mission expressed itself through a stream of increasingly inappropriate comments about Elena's presence in what he termed real combat operations. His youth and inexperience made him susceptible to the influence of older soldiers who viewed female integration with skepticism, and his attempts to process his anxiety resulted in observations that revealed both his immaturity and the unit's underlying tensions about gender roles in combat. Elena accepted his comments with practiced patience, understanding that his concerns reflected broader cultural anxieties rather than personal malice. The patrol's departure from the base followed enhanced security procedures that reflected the elevated threat level they would be facing. Additional ammunition was distributed to all soldiers, and supporting units were placed on heightened alert to provide immediate assistance if needed. Elena's communication equipment was tested one final time before they passed through the perimeter, ensuring that her ability to coordinate with base operations would function reliably throughout the operation. The morning sun cast long shadows across the compound as they moved toward terrain where enemy forces had recently demonstrated their willingness and ability to inflict casualties on coalition troops. The initial movement through familiar territory took on a different character. When viewed through the lens of increased enemy activity, areas that had seemed secure during previous patrols now appeared as potential hiding places for hostile forces, and every piece of high ground represented a possible observation post for insurgents tracking their movements. Elena found herself constantly scanning the horizon for threats while maintaining the communication schedule that kept base operations informed of their progress. The radio chatter that connected them to supporting units provided reassurance that help was available, but it also reminded her that they were moving into an environment where such help might be needed. Corporal Santos's protective instincts toward Elena became more pronounced as they approached the area where the convoy attack had occurred. His positioning near her reflected genuine concern for her safety, but it also demonstrated the assumption that she would need protection rather than be capable of providing it herself. His whispered comments about staying close and letting the men handle any fighting revealed both his good intentions and his fundamental misunderstanding of her capabilities as a trained combat soldier. Elena appreciated his concern while recognizing that such attitudes would limit her ability to contribute effectively to the unit's mission. The sight of the convoy attack told a story of violence and tactical sophistication that exceeded previous enemy capabilities in the region. Burned vehicles sat scattered across the road, their blackened hulks testimony to the intensity of the firefight that had occurred. Crater patterns in the asphalt indicated the use of military-grade explosives, while bullet holes in nearby buildings showed the volume and accuracy of fire that enemy forces had brought to bear. Elena studied these details with professional interest, understanding that such evidence would be crucial for assessing enemy capabilities and planning future operations. Lieutenant Sullivan's investigation of the attack site required systematic documentation that would support intelligence analysis and tactical planning. Elena's role in this process involved photographing evidence and recording observations that would help reconstruct the sequence of events. Her attention to detail proved valuable as she noted patterns that others had missed, including the positioning of explosive devices and the angles of fire that had been most effective against the convoy's defensive measures. These observations demonstrated her tactical acumen while contributing meaningfully to the mission's intelligence-gathering objectives. The discovery of enemy equipment abandoned at the attack site provided disturbing evidence of their growing capabilities. Fragments of sophisticated communication devices suggested coordination abilities that exceeded previous estimates, while ammunition casings indicated access to military-grade weapons that posed serious threats to coalition forces. Elena's documentation of these findings was thorough and professional, her photographs and notes providing the kind of detailed evidence that intelligence analysts would need to assess the implications of enemy technological advancement. The patrol's movement away from the attack site took them deeper into territory where enemy forces were known to operate. Elena's communication with base operations became more frequent as they entered areas where satellite coverage was limited, and terrain features could interfere with radio transmissions. Her equipment functioned reliably despite the challenging conditions, maintaining the connectivity that would be essential if they encountered hostile forces and needed to request support or evacuation. The afternoon heat became oppressive as they continued their reconnaissance, with temperatures climbing toward levels that challenged human endurance and equipment reliability. Elena's body armor trapped heat against her skin while her communication equipment generated additional warmth that added to her physical discomfort. Yet her training had prepared her for such conditions, and she maintained the same level of alertness and professionalism as her male counterparts, despite the environmental challenges that tested everyone's limits. The first indication that they were being observed came from Sergeant Chun, whose combat experience allowed him to recognize subtle signs that less experienced soldiers might miss. Movement in the distance that could have been dismissed as heat, shimmer, or wildlife took on more sinister implications when viewed through the lens of recent enemy activity. Elena noted these observations in her mental log while adjusting her communication equipment to ensure immediate contact with supporting units if the situation escalated beyond reconnaissance into actual combat. The patrol's adjustment to potential surveillance required modifications to their movement patterns that demonstrated the tactical flexibility essential for survival in hostile territory. Elena's position in the formation was adjusted to provide better fields of fire while maintaining her ability to coordinate communications, though Lieutenant Sullivan's protective instincts continued to limit her assignment to the most dangerous forward positions. Her weapon was ready for immediate use, and her ammunition was positioned for quick access during the confusion that would characterize any firefight. The missing patrol's thermal signature was eventually located in a defensive position approximately 2 kilometers from their last reported location, but the surrounding heat pattern suggested they were under observation or direct threat from enemy forces. Lieutenant Sullivan's tactical assessment of the situation required immediate decision-making that would determine the success or failure of their rescue mission. Elena's observations about thermal signatures and communication intercepts were incorporated into his planning, though his reluctance to place her in forward positions limited her ability to contribute to the unit's reconnaissance capabilities. Her suggestions about approach routes and potential enemy positions demonstrated tactical acumen that gradually began to influence even skeptical soldiers, though fundamental attitudes about gender roles in combat remained largely unchanged. The sound of distant gunfire confirmed that the missing patrol was engaged in active combat with enemy forces. Elena's communication equipment immediately prioritized contact with the embattled soldiers, her technical expertise enabling her to establish communication despite interference from enemy jamming attempts. The voices that crackled through her radio painted a picture of soldiers under sustained attack, low on ammunition, and requesting immediate assistance. Their position was defensible but precarious, with enemy forces conducting coordinated assaults. That demonstrated tactical sophistication beyond previous encounters. The rapid movement toward the contact area required Elena to demonstrate the physical endurance and tactical awareness that her training had developed. Despite carrying additional communication equipment that increased her load beyond that of standard infantry soldiers, she maintained the same pace as her male counterparts while monitoring radio frequencies and coordinating with supporting units. Her ability to multitask under stress began to earn grudging respect from soldiers who had questioned her capabilities based on gender stereotypes rather than individual performance. The first visual contact with the battlefield revealed a scene of intense combat that tested every assumption about Elena's readiness for frontline operations. The missing patrol had established a defensive position in a cluster of abandoned buildings, but enemy forces had surrounded them with coordinated fire teams that prevented movement or evacuation. Tracer rounds crisscrossed the area like deadly fireworks, and the constant crack of rifle fire, punctuated by the deeper boom of explosives, created an audio landscape that spoke of desperate combat between determined adversaries. Elena's communication with the embattled patrol provided crucial intelligence about enemy positions and capabilities. Her ability to maintain clear contact, despite jamming attempts and electromagnetic interference, demonstrated technical competence that proved essential for coordinating the rescue operation. The information she relayed to Lieutenant Sullivan about enemy strength and positioning allowed him to develop tactical plans that might otherwise have been impossible without such detailed intelligence about the battlefield situation. The enemy forces arrayed against the missing patrol displayed tactical coordination that exceeded previous estimates of insurgent capabilities. Their positions were well chosen and mutually supporting, creating interlocking fields of fire that made direct assault extremely hazardous. Elena's observations about their communication patterns and movement coordination provided intelligence that suggested these were not local insurgents, but trained fighters with military experience and sophisticated equipment. This assessment had profound implications for the tactical approach required to extract the surrounded patrol. Lieutenant Sullivan's plan for breaking the enemy siege required precise coordination between multiple elements of 3rd Platoon. Elena's role was designated as communication coordinator and medical support, positions that would keep her in relatively protected locations while ensuring her technical capabilities were utilized effectively. However, the tactical situation on the ground would soon prove that predetermined roles meant little when combat operations devolved into the chaos and confusion that characterized actual firefights between determined opponents. The assault began with suppressive fire designed to pin down enemy positions while 3rd Platoon maneuvered into assault positions. Elena's communication equipment coordinated the supporting fire from base operations while maintaining contact with the surrounded patrol. Her ability to manage multiple radio frequencies simultaneously proved crucial as she relayed targeting information to artillery units and provided real-time intelligence about enemy responses to the tactical pressure being applied. Sergeant Chung's fire team encountered unexpected resistance as they attempted to flank the enemy positions. The insurgents had anticipated such maneuvers and prepared defensive positions that channeled attacking forces into predetermined killing zones. Elena monitored the developing situation through her communication equipment while coordinating medical evacuation procedures. for casualties that were beginning to mount as the assault encountered sophisticated enemy defenses. The first casualties of the rescue operation demonstrated the intensity of resistance that 3rd Platoon was facing. Private Richardson was struck by enemy fire while attempting to provide covering fire for advancing soldiers, his wounds serious enough to require immediate medical attention. Elena's medical training proved valuable as she coordinated his evacuation, while maintaining communication responsibilities that were essential for tactical coordination. Her ability to multitask under extreme stress began to demonstrate capabilities that even skeptical soldiers could not dismiss. Corporal Santos found himself pinned down by accurate enemy fire that prevented him from reaching his assigned position. Elena's communication equipment allowed her to coordinate suppressive fire that enabled his movement. But the tactical situation was deteriorating as enemy forces demonstrated capabilities that exceeded intelligence estimates. Her observations about enemy firing positions and movement patterns provided intelligence that proved crucial for adapting tactical plans to the evolving battlefield situation. The turning point in the battle came when Lieutenant Sullivan was wounded by enemy fire while directing the assault on enemy positions. His injury was serious enough to compromise his ability to command effectively, creating a leadership vacuum that threatened to derail the entire rescue operation. Elena found herself in the position of senior communication specialist, with detailed knowledge of the tactical situation, but military protocol and ingrained prejudices about female soldiers in combat roles created confusion about command authority and tactical decision-making. The critical moment arrived when Sergeant Chun assumed tactical command, but lacked the communication equipment and technical expertise necessary to coordinate the complex rescue operation. Elena's unique combination of communication capabilities, tactical awareness, and detailed knowledge of the battlefield situation made her the logical choice to coordinate the operation, but her gender and relatively junior rank created institutional barriers that threatened to prevent effective leadership when it was most desperately needed. The enemy's coordinated assault on 3rd Platoon's positions demonstrated their sophisticated understanding of small unit tactics and their ability to exploit perceived weaknesses in coalition forces. Elena's communication intercepts revealed that enemy commanders were specifically targeting coalition communication equipment and command personnel, understanding that disrupting coordination was the key to defeating a technically superior but numerically smaller force. Her analysis of enemy communication patterns provided intelligence that proved crucial for anticipating their tactical moves. The situation reached crisis proportions when enemy forces launched a coordinated attack that threatened to overrun both the original missing patrol and the 3rd Platoon elements that had come to rescue them. Elena's communication equipment was the only reliable link between scattered friendly forces and supporting units that could provide the firepower necessary to break the enemy assault. Her technical expertise and tactical awareness made her the most qualified person to coordinate the defense, regardless of gender or traditional role assignments. The moment of truth arrived when Elena had to choose between following traditional protocols that would limit her involvement to support roles or assuming the leadership responsibilities that the tactical situation demanded. Enemy forces were advancing on positions where wounded soldiers could not defend themselves effectively, and the communication coordination required to organize an effective defense exceeded the capabilities of soldiers who lacked her technical training and battlefield awareness. Her decision to assume tactical coordination responsibilities would either validate her capabilities or provide definitive evidence that female soldiers were unsuitable for combat leadership roles. Elena's assumption of tactical coordination occurred organically as she began directing suppressive fire and coordinating movement between scattered elements of friendly forces. Her communication equipment allowed her to maintain contact with all elements simultaneously while providing real-time intelligence about enemy positions and movements. The soldiers who had questioned her capabilities found themselves relying on her expertise as the only person with the technical skills and tactical awareness necessary to coordinate an effective response to the enemy assault. The defensive fire that Elena coordinated demonstrated tactical sophistication that surprised both friendly and enemy forces. Her ability to analyze the battlefield situation and direct, supporting fire with precision began to turn the tide of combat in favor of coalition forces. The enemy assault that had seemed unstoppable began to falter as their advance encountered accurately directed fire that exploited weaknesses in their tactical formations that only someone with her training and perspective could have identified. The first enemy position that Elena neutralized through coordinated fire demonstrated capabilities that exceeded every assumption about her combat effectiveness. Her analysis of enemy defensive positions and her ability to coordinate precision fire from multiple friendly elements resulted in the destruction of a machine gun position that had been pinning down coalition forces. The tactical impact of the success began to shift the momentum of the entire engagement in favor of the rescue operation. The second enemy position fell to Elena's tactical coordination as she directed a complex maneuver that used suppressive fire and movement to outflank defenders who had believed their position was impregnable. Her understanding of enemy tactics and her ability to exploit weaknesses in their defensive scheme demonstrated combat leadership that surprised soldiers who had questioned her qualifications for frontline operations. The success of this maneuver enabled the rescue of wounded soldiers who might otherwise have been overrun by advancing enemy forces. The third and fourth enemy positions succumbed to Elena's increasingly sophisticated coordination of friendly fire and movement. Her communication equipment allowed her to direct artillery fire with accuracy that bordered on the surgical, eliminating enemy strong points while avoiding collateral damage to friendly forces. The precision of her targeting and the effectiveness of her tactical coordination began to demonstrate capabilities that exceeded those of many male soldiers with more traditional combat experience. The momentum shift that Elena's tactical leadership created began to cascade through the entire battlefield as enemy forces found themselves under coordinated attack from directions they had not anticipated. Her ability to analyze their defensive scheme and exploit its weaknesses demonstrated tactical acumen that transformed a potential disaster into a successful rescue operation. The enemy commanders who had believed they were facing a demoralized and poorly coordinated opponent found themselves confronting precision fire and sophisticated maneuvers that exceeded their ability to counter effectively. The 5th through 8th enemy positions fell in rapid succession as Elena's tactical coordination reached peak effectiveness. Her communication equipment enabled her to direct fire from multiple sources simultaneously, while coordinating movement that kept friendly forces out of danger zones. The enemy forces that had seemed unstoppable an hour earlier found themselves systematically dismantled by tactics that demonstrated combat leadership of the highest caliber. The 9th enemy position required Elena to personally direct fire while coordinating the evacuation of wounded soldiers from the original missing patrol. Her ability to multitask under extreme stress while maintaining tactical awareness of the entire battlefield demonstrated capabilities that silenced every critic who had questioned female effectiveness in combat operations. The precision of her fire direction and the success of her tactical coordination saved lives that would have been lost under less capable leadership. The 10th and 11th enemy positions fell to coordinated assaults that Elena directed while simultaneously providing medical assistance to wounded soldiers. Her technical expertise and tactical leadership had transformed a desperate rescue operation into a methodical dismantling of enemy defenses that demonstrated combat effectiveness of the highest order. The soldiers who had questioned her capabilities found themselves witnesses to a display of tactical mastery that challenged every assumption about gender roles in combat operations. The 12th and final enemy position required Elena to coordinate a complex assault while managing the evacuation of all friendly forces from the battlefield. Her communication equipment enabled her to direct supporting fire with surgical precision, while ensuring that no friendly personnel were left behind. The success of this final maneuver completed a tactical masterpiece that would be studied in military academies as an example of exceptional combat leadership under the most challenging conditions. The aftermath of the engagement revealed the full scope of Elena's tactical achievement. 12 enemy positions had been systematically neutralized through her coordination and leadership, saving the lives of both the original missing patrol and the 3rd platoon soldiers who had come to rescue them. The enemy forces that had demonstrated sophisticated capabilities and tactical coordination had been defeated by superior leadership and tactical execution that exceeded every expectation about female combat effectiveness. The casualty count from the engagement demonstrated the effectiveness of Elena's tactical leadership. Despite facing numerically superior and well-positioned enemy forces, coalition casualties had been minimized through tactical excellence that prevented the disaster that seemed inevitable when the rescue operation began. Her coordination had saved lives while accomplishing the mission objective of rescuing the missing patrol, validating every argument about female capabilities in combat operations. The intelligence gathered during the engagement provided valuable insights into enemy capabilities and tactics that would prove crucial for future operations. Elena's analysis of enemy communication patterns and tactical procedures demonstrated expertise that extended beyond immediate combat effectiveness to strategic intelligence that would benefit all coalition forces operating in the region. Her contributions to the mission's success encompassed every aspect of military operations, from tactical leadership to strategic intelligence. The transformation in attitudes toward Elena that began during the engagement would continue as soldiers processed what they had witnessed. Her tactical leadership had exceeded that of many male soldiers with more traditional combat experience, and her technical expertise had proven crucial for mission success. The assumptions and prejudices that had surrounded her presence in combat operations had been definitively refuted by performance under fire that demonstrated exceptional capabilities and leadership potential. The silence that followed the final enemy position's destruction carried a weight that transformed every assumption about combat effectiveness and leadership capability. Elena lowered her rifle as smoke drifted across the battlefield where 12 enemy strongholds had been systematically dismantled through tactical coordination that exceeded anything her male colleagues had witnessed. The communication equipment that had enabled her to direct precision fire and coordinate complex maneuvers still crackled with confirmation reports from supporting units, but the immediate threat had been neutralized through combat leadership. That would redefine how 3rd Platoon viewed female soldiers in combat operations. Captain Morrison's voice through the radio carried a tone of disbelief as he processed the after-action reports flowing from the battlefield. The rescue operation that had begun as a desperate attempt to save a surrounded patrol had evolved into a tactical masterpiece that demonstrated combat capabilities no one had expected from the soldier they had labeled a potential liability. Elena's coordination of the engagement had saved lives, while accomplishing objectives that seemed impossible when enemy forces had coalition troops pinned down and facing annihilation. Lieutenant Sullivan, despite his wounds, struggled to comprehend the transformation he had witnessed in a soldier he had relegated to support roles throughout her assignment to the unit. The woman who had endured weeks of skepticism and protective attitudes had assumed tactical command during the most critical moments of combat and delivered results that exceeded the capabilities of seasoned male soldiers. His own tactical training had not prepared him for the level of coordination and battlefield awareness that Elena had demonstrated under extreme stress. Sergeant Chun approached Elena with the kind of stunned respect that comes from witnessing capabilities that challenge fundamental beliefs about military effectiveness. His previous concerns about female soldiers in combat roles had been based on theoretical limitations rather than observed performance, and the reality of Elena's tactical mastery forced him to confront assumptions that no longer held validity. The precision with which she had coordinated fire and movement had exceeded his own tactical abilities despite his years of combat experience. The wounded soldiers from the original missing patrol expressed gratitude that transcended military courtesy as they understood that Elena's tactical intervention had saved their lives. Her coordination of supporting fire had broken an enemy siege that was approaching success, and her tactical leadership had transformed a potential massacre into a successful rescue operation. Their appreciation carried the weight of men who had faced death and understood exactly who had prevented that outcome. Corporal Santos found himself processing emotions that ranged from amazement to shame as he realized how his protective attitudes had underestimated Elena's capabilities. His attempts to shield her from combat dangers had been based on assumptions about female limitations that her performance had definitively refuted. The tactical coordination she had demonstrated exceeded his own abilities and forced him to confront prejudices that had shaped his interactions since her arrival at the base. Private Richardson's youth made him more adaptable to the paradigm shift that Elena's performance represented, but even he struggled to reconcile his preconceptions with the reality of her combat effectiveness. The woman he had viewed as requiring protection had demonstrated tactical leadership that saved lives and accomplished objectives beyond the capabilities of more experienced male soldiers. His education about female capabilities in combat had been delivered through battlefield performance that left no room for doubt or argument. The medical evacuation of wounded personnel provided Elena with opportunities to demonstrate capabilities that extended beyond tactical coordination to comprehensive military competence. Her medical training proved as thorough as her combat skills, and her ability to provide emergency care while continuing to coordinate battlefield activities showed multitasking abilities that impressed even skeptical observers. The wounded soldiers who received her care understood that their survival depended on someone whose capabilities had been consistently underestimated. The intelligence gathered during the engagement provided insights that would reshape understanding of enemy capabilities and tactical approaches throughout the region. Elena's analysis of communication intercepts and tactical patterns demonstrated expertise that extended beyond immediate combat effectiveness to strategic intelligence that would benefit all coalition forces. Her contributions to mission success encompassed every aspect of military operations, from tactical execution to strategic planning. The after-action briefing that followed their return to base required Captain Morrison to acknowledge tactical achievements that challenged his assumptions about female soldiers in combat roles. Elena's coordination of the rescue operation had exceeded the performance standards expected of any soldier regardless of gender, and her tactical leadership had prevented casualties while accomplishing objectives that seemed impossible when the mission began. His official report would document capabilities that contradicted every argument against female integration into combat units. The transformation in unit dynamics began immediately as soldiers processed what they had witnessed during the engagement. Elena's tactical mastery had been demonstrated under conditions where performance could not be questioned or minimized, and her leadership had saved lives in ways that created bonds stronger than traditional military hierarchy. The skepticism and protective attitudes that had characterized her integration into the unit dissolved in the face of combat effectiveness that exceeded established standards. Lieutenant Sullivan's recovery from his wounds provided time for reflection on tactical lessons that extended beyond individual performance to broader questions about leadership and capability assessment. Elena's assumption of command during critical moments had demonstrated decision-making abilities and tactical awareness that his own training had not fully developed. Her performance challenged military culture's assumptions about gender roles, while providing examples of combat leadership that would influence tactical doctrine. The recognition that Elena's capabilities had been systematically underestimated led to broader discussions about assessment methods and integration procedures for female soldiers in combat units. Her exceptional performance suggested that military culture's resistance to female integration was based on prejudices rather than objective capability evaluations. The tactical coordination she had demonstrated provided evidence that diversity in combat units could enhance rather than compromise operational effectiveness. Sergeant Chun's evolution from skeptic to advocate occurred gradually as he processed the implications of Elena's battlefield performance. His combat experience provided perspective on the exceptional nature of her tactical coordination, and his professional integrity forced him to acknowledge capabilities that exceeded his own despite years of frontline experience. His influence within the unit began shifting attitudes among soldiers who respected his combat credentials and tactical judgment. The formal commendations that Elena received for her battlefield performance carried significance beyond individual recognition to broader validation of female capabilities in combat operations. Her tactical coordination had prevented a potential disaster while accomplishing objectives that exceeded mission parameters, and her leadership had demonstrated capabilities that would influence military policy regarding female integration into combat units. The awards acknowledge not just individual achievement, but systemic change in how female soldiers would be evaluated and utilized. Private Richardson's maturation accelerated as he observed the respect that Elena's performance had earned from experienced soldiers whose opinions he valued. His interactions with her shifted from protective concern to professional admiration as he understood that her capabilities exceeded those of many male soldiers with more traditional combat experience. His evolving attitudes reflected broader changes in military culture that Elena's performance had catalyzed. The training modifications that followed Elena's demonstration of tactical capabilities began incorporating lessons learned from her coordination methods and battlefield awareness techniques. Her approaches to communication management and tactical coordination became subjects of study for soldiers seeking to improve their own combat effectiveness. The tactical innovations she had demonstrated during the rescue operation provided examples that would influence military training throughout the service. Corporal Santos's professional development benefited from Elena's willingness to share tactical insights and coordination techniques that had proven effective during combat operations. Her mentoring approach demonstrated leadership qualities that extended beyond battlefield performance to comprehensive military professionalism. The knowledge transfer she provided helped other soldiers improve their capabilities while building unit cohesion based on mutual respect rather than traditional hierarchies. The psychological impact of Elena's performance extended beyond immediate tactical success to fundamental changes in how soldiers viewed female capabilities and integration challenges. Her demonstration that exceptional performance could overcome institutional prejudices provided encouragement for other female soldiers, while educating male soldiers about the benefits of diversity in combat units. The transformation she had achieved through battlefield excellence rather than political arguments proved more effective than policy mandates. The strategic implications of Elena's tactical innovations began influencing operational planning at higher command levels as her methods proved applicable to broader military operations. Her coordination techniques and communication management approaches demonstrated capabilities that could enhance overall military effectiveness when properly understood and implemented. The battlefield lessons she had provided through exceptional performance would influence tactical doctrine and training procedures throughout the service. Elena's integration into 3rd Platoon reached completion as her exceptional capabilities earned unconditional acceptance from soldiers who had initially viewed her presence with skepticism. Her tactical leadership had proven that female soldiers could not only perform effectively in combat operations, but could exceed the capabilities of male soldiers when properly trained and utilized. The unit dynamics that emerged from this transformation demonstrated the potential benefits of successful integration when prejudices were overcome through demonstrated competence. The lasting impact of Elena's battlefield performance would extend far beyond individual recognition to systemic changes in military culture and policy regarding female soldiers in combat roles. Her tactical coordination had provided definitive evidence that capabilities rather than gender should determine assignments and responsibilities. The transformation she had achieved through exceptional performance under extreme stress would influence military operations and integration policies for generations of soldiers who would benefit from the precedent she had established through combat excellence that left no room for doubt or argument. 6 months after the engagement that redefined 3rd Platoon's understanding of combat effectiveness, Elena stood before a classroom filled with military instructors from across the service branches. The tactical coordination methods she had developed during that desperate rescue operation had become required study material for advanced leadership courses, and her battlefield innovations were being incorporated into doctrine that would influence military operations for decades to come. The woman who had once been viewed as a potential liability was now recognized as one of the most tactically gifted soldiers of her generation. The Pentagon's formal review of female integration policies cited Elena's performance as definitive evidence that capabilities rather than gender should determine combat assignments. Her tactical mastery during the rescue operation had provided irrefutable proof that female soldiers could exceed traditional performance expectations when given opportunities to demonstrate their full potential. The policy changes that resulted from her battlefield excellence opened combat roles throughout the military to female soldiers who had previously been excluded based on outdated assumptions about physical and tactical limitations. Captain Morrison found himself serving as an advocate for expanded female integration programs. His conversion from skeptic to supporter complete after witnessing Elena's exceptional performance. His testimony before congressional committees carried the weight of a combat veteran who had observed capabilities that challenged every preconception about military effectiveness. The transformation in his perspective demonstrated how battlefield excellence could overcome institutional resistance more effectively than political mandates or policy directives. The training facility that Elena now commanded represented the training facility that Elena now commanded represented the military's commitment to developing tactical coordination capabilities across all service branches. Her methods for managing complex communications while directing precision fire had proven applicable to operations far beyond the specific circumstances of her original battlefield demonstration. The soldiers who graduated from her programs carried tactical skills that enhanced unit effectiveness regardless of their gender or traditional role assignments. Lieutenant Sullivan, now fully recovered from his wounds, served as Elena's deputy in developing curriculum that emphasized tactical flexibility and coordination excellence. His evolution from protective superior to respectful colleague demonstrated the personal growth that Elena's performance had catalyzed throughout the military hierarchy. Their professional partnership proved that successful integration created benefits that extended beyond individual advancement to enhanced overall capabilities. The memorial service for soldiers killed in the convoy attack that had initiated Elena's rescue mission provided an opportunity to reflect on how individual excellence could honor sacrifice while preventing future casualties. Her tactical innovations had saved lives during subsequent operations, and the training programs she developed were reducing casualty rates across all units that implemented her coordination methods. The fallen soldiers were honored through capabilities that would protect their successors in future conflicts. Elena's promotion to major carried significance beyond individual recognition to symbolic validation of female leadership potential. In combat operations, Her tactical expertise had earned advancement based purely on merit, and her new responsibilities included developing integration policies that would benefit all female soldiers entering combat roles. The authority she now wielded had been earned through battlefield performance that left no doubt about her qualifications for senior leadership positions. The international military exchanges that sought Elena's expertise demonstrated how her tactical innovations had gained recognition beyond American forces. Allied militaries were implementing her coordination methods and communication protocols. Understanding that battlefield excellence transcended national boundaries, her influence on global military doctrine represented the ultimate validation of capabilities that had once been questioned based on gender stereotypes. Sergeant Chun's assignment as Elena's senior enlisted advisor completed his transformation from skeptic to trusted colleague. His combat experience provided valuable perspective on implementing her tactical methods across diverse unit structures, and his credibility with traditional soldiers helped overcome resistance to change. Their professional relationship demonstrated how mutual respect could emerge from shared commitment to military excellence, regardless of personal backgrounds or initial prejudices. The documentary film about Elena's battlefield performance reached audiences far beyond military circles, inspiring young women to pursue careers in fields where their capabilities had previously been questioned. Her story provided evidence that exceptional performance could overcome systemic barriers, and her tactical achievements demonstrated that diversity could enhance rather than compromise organizational effectiveness. The cultural impact of her example extended influence far beyond military service to broader questions about gender roles and capability assessment. Private Richardson, now a seasoned soldier himself, frequently shared stories about Elena's leadership during the rescue operation. His perspective as someone who had witnessed her transformation from underestimated newcomer to tactical master provided credibility that influenced attitudes among soldiers who had not personally observed her capabilities. His advocacy for female integration programs carried the authority of combat experience and first-hand knowledge of exceptional performance under extreme stress. The tactical simulation programs that incorporated Elena's coordination methods became standard training tools across all service branches. Her battlefield innovations had been analyzed and systematized into teachable techniques that improved unit effectiveness, regardless of the specific circumstances where they were applied. The lasting impact of her tactical genius would benefit countless soldiers who would never know the origin of the methods that enhanced their combat capabilities. Elena's marriage to a fellow officer who had served in a different unit during her original assignment demonstrated that personal relationships could flourish alongside professional excellence. Their partnership proved that successful integration created opportunities for normal military careers rather than requiring sacrifice of personal fulfillment. The family they built together represented the complete acceptance that Elena had achieved through exceptional performance and dedicated service. The congressional testimony that Elena provided about integration challenges and solutions influenced legislation that expanded opportunities for female soldiers throughout the military. Her credibility as a combat veteran who had exceeded performance expectations gave weight to recommendations that might otherwise have been dismissed as politically motivated. The policy changes that resulted from her advocacy would benefit generations of female soldiers who would face fewer barriers to full participation in military service. Corporal Santos, now serving as a training instructor himself, incorporated lessons learned from Elena's leadership into programs that emphasized capability-based assignment rather than traditional role restrictions. His evolution from protective colleague to equality advocate demonstrated how personal experience with exceptional performance could transform attitudes more effectively than abstract arguments about fairness or opportunity. His influence on new soldiers helped ensure that Elena's legacy would continue through changed perspectives and improved practices. The academic research that analyzed Elena's tactical methods provided scholarly validation of her innovations, while contributing to broader understanding of leadership effectiveness under extreme stress. Her coordination techniques became subjects of study in military academies and civilian institutions, demonstrating that her contributions extended beyond immediate operational improvements to fundamental advances in tactical science. The intellectual legacy of her battlefield performance would influence military thinking for generations. The retirement ceremony that honored Elena's service career provided recognition for achievements that had transformed military culture while advancing tactical doctrine. Her battlefield excellence had opened opportunities for countless female soldiers while improving overall military effectiveness through innovative approaches to coordination and leadership. The influence she had wielded through exceptional performance, rather than political advocacy, proved more lasting than policy mandates or legislative requirements. Elena's final assignment as commandant of the premier Military Leadership Academy represented the ultimate validation of capabilities that had once been questioned based on gender rather than merit. Her responsibility for developing the next generation of military leaders provided opportunities to institutionalize the lessons learned from her own experience with integration challenges and battlefield excellence. The officers who graduated under her leadership would carry forward values of merit-based assessment and capability-focused assignment that would prevent future talented soldiers from facing the barriers she had overcome. The Strategic Planning Conference, where Elena presented her analysis of future military challenges, demonstrated how her tactical expertise had evolved into comprehensive understanding of defense requirements. Her insights about unit composition and capability development influenced procurement decisions and training priorities that would shape military effectiveness for decades. The transformation from underestimated soldier to strategic thinker represented the full realization of potential that had been temporarily obscured by prejudice and assumption. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.